Today we talk about the controversial topic in ultramarathon running, cheating. Although the trail and ultra running community is usually pretty relaxed and not super competitive, there is still some cheating that happen. And cheating in ultra running is not necessarily common and we rarely talk about it. For the longest time, we've relied a lot on the honor system, which means that cheater could proliferate, and that's what we'll talk about today. Is there cheating in trail and ultra running? Are we doing enough to control it? Hi, Simon here. Welcome to my channel. On my channel, you can follow my journey towards racing 100-mile ultramarathon. I'm also providing a lot of tips video to help you have your own adventure. But today we talk about something a little bit different. We talk about cheating in trail and ultra running. And cheating is a touchy subject. It's a subject that if you bring too often, you're labeled as being almost paranoid. We need to trust each other, and I very much support that. At the same time, if we don't talk about it, then we're really creating an environment where cheaters can proliferate because they're ignored, because there's no control. So I think there's a fine balance between ignoring that cheating is a possibility and obsessing about it. And that's what this video is about. This video is about just raising awareness, having a dialogue, having a discussion, but not obsessing over it. And recently, especially if you're in the US, you might have heard about the mini scandal that happened with Black Canyon Ultramarathon from Aravaipa. But this video is really not about that. We'll talk about it towards the end because I think it's a good example to kind of encapsulate the discussion. But really, I was planning this video for the longest time. But really, the discussion, I think, is much more important. It's much broader than that. And it's because the sport has been growing rapidly, which is very positive. More people coming into trail and ultra running, that's really the goal of my channel, right? Is to have as many people having these wonderful adventure. But with more people comes money.
More money, more problems, Stanley. You of all people should know that.
That's creating an incentive for some people to have bad behavior. Because for the longest time, and still to this day, trail and ultra running for the vast majority is not very competitive. It's much more a bunch of hippies having fun in the mountain, but it is slowly evolving. And that's where we need to think a little bit about how we approach these things, because obviously there's the elite level where there's an incentive. You can be a full-time runner nowadays and make a good amount of money. So there's motivation there, but there's also the influencer breed. And obviously I have a YouTube, so I guess technically I'm an influencer, but you know the type of influencer that I mean, you know, like the Liver King type of influencer that are working with marketing agency, that are selling supplement, that are trying to convince you of something that is obviously a lie. Is there any cheating? And spoiler alert, the answer is yes, there's definitely cheating in trail and ultra running. There's absolutely no question there. I mean, obviously some people get caught, which means that yes, there is definitely cheating. And the real question is much more how much of it goes on. Like, is it the super exceptional thing happening that some people are cheating? Is it common, uncommon? Is it just at the pro level, amateur level, influencers? That's what we'll talk about a little bit today. And I don't have the answer to that. You know, I definitely don't have the answers of how many pros are doping. Nobody truly knows that. And one of the reasons it's easy to think that the problem is bigger than what we see is that if you look at other sports, you can use that as, you know, a way to measure why would trail runner be any different than road marathon or a cyclist. And if anything, if we don't control as much, then maybe we're favoring that behavior. And yes, it's easy to make comparison to cycling where, you know, the golden era of EPO and these things, you know, Lance Armstrong and everything, everyone was doping. Like, that's what we find out in retrospect. Of course, they were testing back then, but what you find out is that everyone was doping. But at the same time, it's easy to think, yeah, but cycling, there's so much money in there, and that's why they were cheating. But I think a parallel that is actually much more relevant and much more interesting from a kind of psychology perspective is actually outside of the sport world altogether. And if you look at video game and speed running, it's actually a great parallel with the trail and ultra running community. So for those of you that are not familiar with that, speed running is basically playing a video game as fast as possible. Nowadays, there's definitely some money to be made there, and you probably can make a career out of that. But if you go back a few years, it was a very small community. There was not necessarily money or sponsorship to be made. People were just doing it because they were enjoying it. Just like trail and ultra running. Fascinating to look back at these things because, for example, if you take a game, I think it was Mario 64, one of the way to cheat, especially back then, was instead of playing the full game from the beginning to the end, you just play segment of it and you put together your best segment when you succeed something difficult, and that way you're able to compress the time, and then you give a video that is an edit of all of those segments together. And tools have evolved where now people are able to dive into these video proof that someone did a speed run and had a new world record, and what they find out is that the video was spliced, so basically editing of different segments together. And what they found out is a lot of the most famous people, a lot of the big names were actually cheating all that time. And if you think back, it's like, well, they didn't do it for the money, they didn't do it to be super famous, like, superstar, but within the community, they were getting something out of that. And I think that's something that we have to keep in mind. It's not always about the money why people are cheating. In fact, I would say that the reason people cheat are typically not because of the money. Money will make it more likely to happen, but I think a lot of it is about ego and how you want to be perceived by other people. If you look at running case like the Mexico Marathon, where I can't remember the number, but it's something like 10,000 runners were disqualified for course cutting clearly on purpose. Why? You're a mid-pack runner. Who cares? They're not going to sign any sponsorship with Nike. They just do it so that people in their family or their friends online are impressed with their time, which sounds bizarre, but I think that's the motivation of a lot of people that end up cheating. It's about ego. It's about realigning how you perceive yourself to the image that people have of you. Now, of course, a big reason why people might cheat, especially elite runner and I think influencer that are trying to sell you supplements, I think a lot of that will be money and fame. And I think that in a lot of cases, there can even be a rationalization that you don't necessarily feel guilty that you're cheating. If you think that everyone around you is doping, you will not feel like doping is unfair. If anything, it will feel that not doping is unfair, and what you're doing is leveling the playing field. If you want to compete as a bodybuilder, well, you're gonna have to dope. It's not necessarily that you want to dope, but you want to compete at that level. Other people are doing it, therefore you have to do it. And let's mention it here. I think there's a huge difference between the standard that I hold elite runner and like influencer, like people that are basically professional, and the back of the pack runner that is just doing it for themselves. I think the back of the pack runner, if you're cheating, you're really cheating yourself, and you're really the biggest victim out of that. But I do care a lot more about the integrity of the elite runner, and when people have messages, how to train, I think these should be held to a higher standard. Another distinction that I make is, what is cheating anyway? Is cheating breaking the rules? Is breaking the rule cheating? I think it's a little bit more complex than that. For me, cheating is a little bit more narrow than breaking the rules. Cheating is much more related to breaking the rules to gain an unfair advantage. There are rules sometimes, like some of the rule will be polite at aid station and with volunteers. I mean, if you're an asshole at the aid station, it's not giving you an unfair advantage. Don't do it, right? Don't break the rules. But I don't consider that cheating. I consider that breaking the rules. And within these rules also, yes, there's things that are more about building a positive environment, being nice to each other, supporting each other. But there are rules also for safety. And that one I have almost no tolerance for breaking these rules. It's not cheating, but you should really not break these rules. I guess you should not break any rule, right? But the safety rules for me are the most important one. It should always be respected. And I don't think we should have too much tolerance for people just not following that, because you're putting yourself at risk, but also people around you. And how are people actually cheating in trail and ultra running? But I'm going to give example, and that's where I hope that you will see that it's a little bit more complex of cheating, not cheating. Like there's a gradient there, and I think the punishment or the consequence of that should follow that gradient to some extent. So some of the obvious one, I think that's probably more an issue for pro or elite athletes, but it would be doping, straight up doping, performance enhancing drug. But even that is more complicated than that. There's obviously a list of prohibited substance, but of these substances, you have substance like EPO and steroids that obviously you gain unfair advantage from that. But there's other substances that are banned because it could mask the use of these things. And obviously a pro should not use any of those. But at the amateur level, if you take a diuretic that could mask steroid, I mean, should you be disqualified from the race? Obviously not. Like, yeah, technically it's cheating, but beyond doping, so you have obviously course cutting. And course cutting, there's the obvious one where, you would have, let's say, a loop and you find a way to do a shorter distance. Like, that's obvious course cutting. That's really bad. If there was a junction and you go in the wrong direction, what you're supposed to do, you're supposed to go backward, go where you exit the course, and then go back. But, what happens if you go directly? And obviously, that's not what you're supposed to do. Do I care that an average runner does that? Absolutely not. I would never report someone like that. But obviously, that's not what you're supposed to do, and everyone knows that. Another thing that is typical is receiving aid outside of an aid station. So you have designated areas to receive support. These areas are designated where your crew can support you. Any help received outside of that can be ground for disqualification. There was a famous case at Hard Rock. The first finisher was disqualified because he received some water maybe a mile outside of an aid station. Something else that can happen, most race as a pacer, you're not allowed to mule, which means you're not allowed to carry anything of theirs. They carry their stuff, you carry your stuff. And obviously there's a bajillion other rules, but these are kind of the common one and the common ones that would be associated to cheating. And hopefully you can see that there's definitely a difference between using a car and getting a glass of water 1 mile outside of the aid station. Both of them are breaking rules, but really can't wrap your head around someone getting in a car in an ultramarathon, whereas some of the other stuff can be a little bit milder. I mean, you should know better, like the stack size of your shoes, you should know better if you're a pro runner, but at the same time, it's a milder rule a little bit. And so the consequence is not automatically disqualification. But what if there's a huge puddle or something like that, and you just go around the trail and you go back? Technically, you're not allowed to do that, but nobody would care that you went 30 feet to avoid some obstacle. I mean, that's just a normal thing to do. Technically, you're supposed to go back. And that's where there is a gray zone area where, well, how much off the course were you, and was that intentional? Did you gain anything from that? Or you were off the course because you literally lost the trail, you did not know where the trail happened. Obviously, that has happened to me. I'm just swashbuckling and I have no clue where I lost the trail. I have no clue where the trail is, and I'm just lucky that I find the trail eventually. I mean, how the heck am I gonna go back and find where I lost the trail? I have no clue. Technically, I mean, I was course cutting, but practically I lost 1 hour trying to figure out where the heck am I. Mid-packer, I mean, come on, who cares, right? But pro runner are held to a higher standard where they should know the rule and they should know what to do when these things happen. Because there are consequences to cheating. And obviously, if cheaters are not caught, the consequence is, especially at the pro level, you're taking opportunities from runners that would be the one deserving the accolade or the sponsorship or anything like that. There's a consequence for people that are honest. And I think there's beyond that, there's even bigger consequence where if cheating becomes very prevalent and it's the only way of winning at some point, then you're encouraging people to cheat, because then the decision at the pro level may become, well, I can either cheat and then maybe win, and maybe I'll get caught, but probably not, and I'll be fine. And if I get caught, then I don't have a career anymore. Or I don't cheat and I will never win, which means I'll never have a career anyway. And I think that's part of the justification. If you think about cycling back in the early 2000s, Lance Armstrong, where everyone was doping, I think that was the mindset. Like, yeah, I could get caught and my career is over, but if I don't dope, my career is already over. You're pushing people in the direction of cheating, and I don't think it's necessarily bad intent or that they're all bad people, but you're creating an environment where cheating is favored. On the other hand, there are consequences if you get caught cheating, obviously, and it could be penalty time. It most likely will be disqualification, and if it gets public, then your whole reputation is kind of ruined a little bit. And that's where I think there's a fine balance that is very, very difficult to find between protecting whistleblower or people that are reporting abnormalities and protecting people's and athletes' reputation until things are proven. Obviously, you don't want to be in a situation where you're absolutely not protecting whistleblower and they get a lot of hate for basically just standing up for what's right. If their intention is good and if it's done properly, which usually means not going public and saying that person is a cheat and not having any proof. I think that's the wrong way of doing that. You don't want to be also in an environment where people just start accusing each other all the time and then you don't know who to trust. Like, that's creating something that is very toxic. So you need to protect whistleblower to some extent, but you also need to protect people's reputation, even if it's an honest mistake, even if there were no intent of cheating. I still think that someone should be disqualified, but maybe it doesn't need to be, blown everywhere and really kill someone's racing career because of that. Whereas if it was malicious, then yeah, and we go back to, if you get in the car, I'm sorry, like it has to be public. Let's talk about the Aravaipa and Black Canyon situation. So if you're not familiar, Black Canyon 100K is one of the biggest 100K and most competitive 100K in the US. It's a golden ticket race, which means that the top runner will have an automatic entry into Western states. So you have the best of the best there. It's super competitive and it's a great race. I've done it, I think 2 or 3 times, really had a great time. Actually, I did it with Nara together one time. It was a lovely race. We had so much fun. So we're nowhere near these guys and these girls that are just like blasting at full speed. We're just having fun, but they're doing their things ahead. And what happened is that this year there was a runner that was reported for having run off the course. And what happened is, my understanding, and I'm not super into detail, was that there was a Y junction or a junction with a dirt road and then a single track, and you're supposed to go on the single track. He went on the dirt road. When he realized that, and I really think it was an honest mistake, then he decided to go directly back to the trail and then continue. Which obviously that's not what you're supposed to do. What you're supposed to do is go backward and do it. That's what he should have done, and he should have known better. There was also a question as to receiving help from his crew, I think outside of a place where they could receive help. I don't know the exact detail for that. And the race director was notified, investigated the situation, found that yes, there was indeed some issues there. And then the consequence of that was a 20-minute penalty. And so that was the situation. The runner was not on the podium, would not have been on the podium. And that was that. I don't think it was disclosed publicly. Maybe it was, but if it was, certainly it did not get the level of attention that it got very recently, where whistleblower decided to expose that and say, hey, like, what's up with that? And the reaction from the public was fairly negative with the decision that was made. And now I think it's important to mention that the race is organized by Aravaipa, and Aravaipa is a race organization. If you look at all of the metal behind me, I mean, I don't know, like half of that is racing race from Aravaipa. They've done so much for the trail running community in the US. The sport that we love in big part is because of these guys and these girls having done such a fantastic job organizing this race. I'm very biased, but I really think they're a great organization, and I think that's really important to emphasize that. I think Jubilee is the race director for Black Canyon. She's great, she's great, and I really trust their judgment. I really trust that it was with good intention, the decision that they made, that they felt it was not warranting a disqualification. But the public perception was a little bit negative with that, because in a lot of other races, even just the thing about the crew support outside of a designated crew support would be automatic disqualification. Going off the course and not going backward, same thing, would be considered ground for automatic disqualification. It's not like he ran on the dirt road for like 10 miles. I don't know the distance, but I think it was a quarter mile or half a mile, something like that. So yes, it's definitely an advantage, and yes, definitely should have gone backward. But I think that was part of the decision, that there was no malicious intent. It's not like in the morning he was like, at that junction, I'm gonna go on the road and then go like bushwalking in the desert. What happened was a mistake on race day, took the wrong turn, and then decided directly to go to the trail, which that was a mistake. But then when it got public's attention, then I think Aravaipa did the right thing. There was discussion between all parties involved, and I don't know who made the decision, but in the end, the runner was disqualified, and that's kind of the end of the story. And personally, what I think the runner should have known better. I think Aravaipa acted in good faith. I do think that the punishment or the consequence was light at first, and I think that's what people react to a little bit. But to me, the situation is highlighting something that's a little bit broader and not specifically targeted at Aravaipa, but more about the role specifically of individual race as opposed to having kind of a league or a body that is making decision or overseeing these decisions at a broader scale. Because one of the problems that people have pointed out is that the race Black Canyon is organized by Aravaipa, and then the runner is on the Aravaipa running team. I really don't think that had any impact on the decision itself, but it's easy to see that, well, is there a conflict of interest there? And again, I really don't think that had any impact on the decision, but I think if there was a body, an association of runners that are overseeing these decisions at the professional level, should that person be disqualified, I think that would legitimize the decision, and then it's not the weight of that decision does not rest solely on the race director and anyone that was consulted on their shoulder, but is really a broader question to the community, which is, should a runner be disqualified in that situation? And that would help make decision a little bit more uniform across all the races, and it would remove the the perception that there was any influence. Again, I really don't think there was any influence like that, but I can understand how, from an outsider's perspective, it doesn't look great. I think it's a great opportunity to ask ourselves, like, should there be a runner association or race organization, especially at the pro level, right? I mean, at the back of the pack runner, that a runner would be or not be disqualified, we really don't care about that. Like, I think that's very appropriate that the race director, they have their style and they decide. But when it comes to that level, maybe there needs to be something a little bit broader. And the reason I think it's important is that beyond this, when you think about it, when you think about the ways of cheating, one of the big ways is doping. And how can a single race control for that? Yes, they can test after the race, and some race will do that. But the reality is that if you're smart, you're going to be doping in your training, and you're going to make sure that you don't have anything suspicious in your body when you're racing, when you know that you have a control. So the way to actually test for these things would be to have random control throughout the years. That would be one of the roles, is control for doping, but also making sure that decision and rules are applied uniformly across the board, and for race director to not be scrutinized for any decision, to not be told like, hey, that punishment was not severe enough. I think that's a terrible position to be in when, again, I really think that Jubilee made that decision 100% out of good faith, but then you're blamed for something like that. And that's kind of crappy, because she's trying to make a decision that is fair. The sad news is there cheating in trail and ultra running? Yes, there is. There was before and there will be in the future. That's something that is in human nature. Unfortunately, we cannot fully avoid it. But we can try to prevent it to some extent. And that's where I think having these discussions can be very productive as to understanding how should we behave as a community. Because personally, I really don't want a police state where back of the pack runner are being scrutinized for everything they do. Let's trust each other, okay? There's really two different groups. There's like the professional, which are elite and influencer, which I think should be held to a higher standard. And then you have your average runner that's just out there to push his limit. I'm not saying you should be cheating at all, but if you're cheating, the consequence is on yourself. You're cheating yourself. Whereas pros, different stories. If you told me today, Simon, nobody's doping, good. If you tell me, Simon, a few people are doping at the pro level, but not everyone, I would feel bad because it would be really unfair. I would rather that they're all doping or none of them are doping. But I would really prefer that they don't dope at all, because there are consequences to using steroids, there are consequences to using EPO, increase cardiovascular risk, and all of these things. And I want my pro runner to be healthy. So I don't want a place where it would say, hey, fudge it, like you guys can do whatever you want. Just do it, like dope as much as you want. This way, it's a level playing field. That's an argument that is said very often, but I think it would lead to really toxic behavior. And you can look at the bodybuilding world. Doping is very common, and they're very open about it. And I really appreciate the transparency of at least some, or I guess the majority of bodybuilders saying like, yes, I'm on these cycles. Yes, I'm doing, I don't even know the name, but like these steroids. And yes, that's how I'm able to have this physique. At the same time, they go so crazy, and younger young men using crazy amount of steroids, and that has long-term consequence for their health. And I don't want it to become the norm. I don't want that the only way to compete in trail and ultra running is to be doping to your gill. I would rather have it clean, and for that we have to control. We can't deny the fact that people will do it if we don't control for it. But what do you think? I'm curious to know in the comments below. Do you think there's cheating in trail and ultra running? Do you think it's common? Do you think we talk about it too much or too little? Are we doing too much or too little to prevent it? Is it now a witch hunt? Or are we just like our head in the sand and not doing anything and it's just helping cheaters cheat? Let us know in the comments below. Obviously, the video was not so much about the Black Canyon situation, but it was hard to not talk about it. Curious, in the comments below, you can let me know, what do you think? Do you think they did the right thing? Do you think there's things that they should have done differently? The whole point is really to have a constructive dialogue. That's really the message of my channel, right? We want to have a positive community, and for that we need to be able to talk. So stay respectful, understand that both the runner, the race director, everyone, these are people that are trying their best out of this situation. So let's stay respectful in the comments below. As always, thanks for watching. If you appreciate this video, please leave a thumbs up and see you next time.